Exactly. I wouldn't dream of posting that.
Welcome back, Bear Clingers, to another installment of the most heavily armed podcast in New Hampshire. This is GrokTALK, brought to you by those friendly bloggers at GrokTALK.com. Housed like a cartridge in the grassroots magazine of the CHT offices.
Hey, is the Wi-Fi working?
New Hampshire.
I'm a bitter clinger.
We're all
Is
bitter
David, our
clingers.
landlord, is the Wi-Fi working?
Yeah,
good
Wi-Fi works great.
Pretty
Thanks.
good.
We
This
are
is
on
our
the air
wholesome,
talking about the Wi-Fi.
generous,
Hey, I
wonderful-
wanted to start out by talking about some things that have been going on in New Hampshire this week. Like we have some mobile domicile voter issues, and one of the people,
A sawmill?
Yeah, we just got that. We'll get to that in a second. One of the people, I want to be looking for media outlets in Democrat Congressman Chris Van Hollen's Maryland District 8. So if you're familiar with any of those, let me know. You see, they might be interested in knowing that their congressman paid one of his staffers as much as $1,470 a week in taxpayer dollars to live at New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark's house. We call it Martha's Motel now. So she could then, the staffer, vote not from her Vermont Street, Washington, D.C. apartment, but in New Hampshire. So we would like to contact any media outlets in that area that might be interested in knowing how their congressman is spending their money.
And we'd like to do the same thing as far as Arkansas is concerned. Around the Little Rock area, we have yet another young aspiring political operative that was living here in New Hampshire at Martha's Motel.
Martha's Motel.
And it's not Billy Bob's cousin?
No, not Billy Bob. This is a young, brand new, newly minted lawyer who has decided that he could come here as part of the Organizing for America and do all kinds of political work for the Democrats, vote here, but all of his professional stuff says he lives in yet another state.
There we go. Well, just down by your chin. A little lower. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, marvelous.
Would you like that?
Move your mic.
With outstanding, high quality, technical... No, never mind. Okay. I'm back, by the way. I was gone last week. I had some surgery.
Yes. I'm glad to see that you're back in the seat for which you are suited.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, my ass has shaped the chair appropriately for my ass, and I'm in it. So here we go.
Yes. Back at the board.
Back at the board. So, let's talk about Martha's Motel. Oh, we can talk about anything. A lot of things are going on.
Oh, just a ton of stuff. We've got an incipient fight going on in D.C. concerning Obamacare, whether to pass yet another useless attempt of political theater of repealing Obamacare out of the House, or this time actually using the constitutional powers bequeathed by our founders to the U.S. House of Representatives and just defund it. And we're seeing that U.S. Senator Mike Lee, along with Ted Cruz and a few other stalwart constitutionalists or constitutionally minded type folks in both the Senate and the House, saying, yeah, we could do that. And we can do that coming up September 30th. And September 30th is quite the date because the next continuing resolution of feeding more dollars into the maw of government is coming up. And as you know, folks, we were rather disheartened with the last two continuing resolutions because they just increased spending instead of lowered spending. And several people have lost their seats over that, including our own Frank Ginter, because he promised something to which he did not deliver. We were just talking about that off air a few minutes ago.
Indeed. So we got the continuing resolution, which is the continuation of the budget.
Correct.
Without actually passing a budget, which is bad enough. We have the debt ceiling, which was elastically raised and has magically not been breached since, which is clearly a travesty. And then we've got the attempts to repeal Obamacare.
No, I'm going to dispute that. We had something that came along that kept us from going over. It was called sequestration. And during that time that the sequestration actually has been in effect, we've actually been running a surplus. What do you know? That old mantra of low taxes are the result of low spending. Well, we don't have the low taxes, but look, we've got lower spending because we finally forced it on ourselves. And look what happened.
Plus they had a bumper tax season.
They did. But, we've got that coming up, and there's a bunch of our Congress critters who are saying it's time to defund Obamacare. This is a hill on which we can stand. And now you've got the establishment Republicans going, oh no, this is a repeat. We can't shut down government. People won't like us anymore.
And I always maintain that yes, you can, because most of what government does isn't essential.
Most of what the federal government does isn't essential, and I think people need to understand that they have state governments that handle a great deal of what happens. And even when the government shutdowns, a lot of the stuff still gets funded.
And gets done.
Now, the question they should ask is why, first of all, consider you send your money to Washington, D.C., which can be a very far away place depending on where you live. So they can then tell you, wherever you are, how best to use that money, how to allocate it, where to spend it, how to spend it, what the rules are, blah, blah, blah. So if you just kept that money in your state and you voted for people who decided for you, up the street, down the road, across the meadow, how to spend it, you'd have more control. And if, say, for example, the federal government did shut down, why would you give a damn?
Correct. And for the most part, I still believe in what Texas Governor Rick Perry said. Government should be as inconsequential on a daily basis as possible. And it really should. It's only the progressives who've decided that we will politicize everything because government should have a role in every little bit of your personal life. Pretty much they've succeeded, guys.
They have. I think people also need to understand that the conservative truth is that what we want for you is for you to keep more of your own money, for you to make more of your own decisions with your money that affect your life, to have less government, to have the NSA not spying on your emails, to have the IRS not peeking in your windows. I mean, these are all things we want. We want you to be just free to, live your life and do what you want, and with as little government as is actually required to keep the lights on, the roads paved, or whatever, whatever you think is your government should be responsible for. Right? There are people who don't think the roads should be paved. Fine, whatever you think. But all of us together agree that we do need some things, but we don't really need all the things that the Democrats think we do.
Yeah, and I think the progressives have made quite the advance in trying to make us think that only government can provide most of what we need in the first place, whereas I go, not so much, because here in New Hampshire, we have the privilege of understanding and seeing in action that one person can make a difference. We don't need a whole collective of people to do stuff. And I'm quite sure that in other states that are far larger than us, that one principle, that one person or one group of committed people can make a change for better and solve their own community's problems without having to rely on far off bribe money being returned with strings attached.
Yeah, well, I've always maintained the federal government is about 5 times too big for what the nation needs. Everything that's not in, everything outside of national defense, national diplomacy, and a small amount of glue that holds the states together is in fact the province of the states, properly stated in the Constitution. And it's nice to note, Jeff mentioned last week, Jeff Chittister, that one of the states out west had actually passed a law, which is like pending signature, that would effectively escrow all tax monies which the feds thought they were owed, and then remit to the feds what they were worth and redistribute the rest back in the state.
I could like that. I could really like that. But we have some changing to do here in New Hampshire to be able to do that.
We have some changing to do nationally, because I was looking at some recent polling on the abortion issue, the 20-week issue.
Oh, yeah.
That keeps coming up, and a majority of Americans, including people who think abortion should be legal, believe that 20 weeks is when you should stop allowing them for any reason. And that's not the reason why I brought it up. The reason why I brought it up is because in this particular poll, something like 86% of these people believe that abortion should be managed by the federal government, not by the states, which is a frightening percentage.
Well,
It's the movement for uniformity. They want uniformity. They don't understand that the states did a fine job of cooperating before the federal government started to legislate everything.
Well, the other thing is, think about what de Tocqueville said and what a lot of people have said about the success of America being based on the fact that normally you can't run a country this large from one place like Washington, D.C. The reason it was successful is because really all it was a bunch of little countries, states, operating independently with a federal government.
and you'd be wrong, oh board master.
What?
The founders said we wanted a limited government. not only just at the federal level, but also at the state level.
I wasn't going that deep. My point is,
But you
that
said,
can't-
no, but de Tocqueville said it was more the voluntary associations of citizens banding together to solving a purpose, solving it, and then disbanding it without ever even using government. That was his point.
Yeah, but
when
I
he talked
used
about...
this word.
Huh?
My point was that with 50 different states, all managing their own affairs
Correct.
as independently as possible, okay, which is now no longer possible, you could maintain the degree of economic freedom and personal liberty that we used to have before the federal government tried to swallow everything. And that's in essence. And we can go into the finer points as much as you want. I'm sure our readers would love to. Oh, he's showing us something. What's that?
Oh, that's
Are we
yes.
squirreling?
Thank you. Yes, squirrels.
Squirrels,
Yes.
okay.
I had to suggest a change in one of the post titles.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
My wordsmithing was a little too edgy, so Anthony Weiner is a
I know all about the edgy wordsmithing.
Yes, I was holding on to you by your ankles as you went over the cliff.
Anthony Weiner is a one-man target-rich environment. It's tempting sometimes to use words that are a little too near to the knuckle.
Well, that brings up a sort of a side tangent to what we're talking about. That whole, Anthony Weiner, Mark Sanford, Elliot Spitzer type deal, Marion Barry.
Filmer.
Yes, the filmer, the San Diego mayor, who's now accused of harassment, has
Filmer.
been for years, for decades in
I
Congress.
wrote about him yesterday.
And
Waiting for Harold to write a post denouncing him. Haven't seen it.
Well, Harold's ignored me too, because I asked the same question. And it really is, are we seeing the decline of the United States, not so much because of the quality of the politicians we keep sending into D.C., but should we actually be looking at the quality of the politicians we send to D.C. and elsewhere and go, what the heck's wrong with the electorate? I look at this and go, Anthony Weiner, who decides to send nudie pictures or selfies to strange women, and this is somebody who was leading, up until just a week ago, was leading in the polls to become the next New York mayor. I sit here and
His
go...
polling numbers have flagged a bit.
Yeah, they've gone rather flaccid.
I think flagged.
Yeah, you did. See, that
was the title I wrote. My title was Wiener poll flaccid after
Yes.
the recent event.
But-
which is near the knuckle in itself. That's the problem with Anthony Weiner. It's a target-rich environment. It invites wordsmithing, and nearly all wordsmithing is necessarily near the knuckle. We have to be very careful.
Yes, you're right up to that line, but
And I walked that line very well. Thank you.
But I look at who are these people who would actually put him up front in the polling with 5 other candidates, and I keep going, what's with the electorate nowadays? Is there no shame? Is there no sense of morality at all? Or have the progressives actually come through, at least in this bastion of liberalism called New York City, and said, we don't care. All we want is that you give us the bacon.
Well, that's what we just, like I posted yesterday about Filner. They knew about, the Democrat Party out there knew about Filner for years. The thing was, they wanted him for the agenda. They didn't care. They were willing to overlook women being sexually harassed,
Physically.
emotionally, mental torture, the whole 9 yards, binders full of women, bothered by this guy, and they just said, you know what? That's not important to us. He's a Democrat and he's pushing the right agenda, so we're just going to ignore everything we've ever said about women and sexual harassment just because we like this guy.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the absolute power corrupts absolutely kind of phrase, and the Democrats said, well, we own the mayoralty of San Diego, which is one of the largest cities, not just in California, but in New York. I have co-workers who live and work there. They tend to be a more conservative bunch, and they're going, we can't believe this. And, the Democrat chair there...
Molly Shaheen went to college in San Diego.
Yeah, just rebuked his behavior. Just did that. And I mean, we have New Hampshire State Representative Timothy Horgan. I have to give him some props here, because he comes to Granite Rock all the time and posts, unlike most Democrats. And
he posts as himself. He doesn't hide behind a screen name or a...
No, you got to give him props for standing up now. Most of us look at his comments and go, how is this even relevant to the post? But at least he comes in and we've been after Harold Kirsten, who is the NH Democrat Party press secretary. for not talking about this. And Timothy's always being the great apologist that he is trying to say stuff. And he finally said, well, the San Diego Democrats finally have spoken up and denied him. And it's like, why didn't they say this about Filner years ago? I mean, that's the thing. If the shoe was on the other foot, if this was a Republican, you can bet Harold would be here in New Hampshire would be saying
This
something
would have
about
been
that.
24/7 news in the media everywhere until they were gone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, look, in the case of Weiner, it was the somewhat conservative New York Post that was first out of the gate with the nasty headlines. But when the shoe was on the other foot, Bob Packwood or Woodpecker or whatever you want to call him, the Democrat media was perfectly happy to mangle names all day long to disgrace him.
And you know, if you're gonna, from our aspect, this is where we get into trouble, us Groksters at Granite Grok, because we look at offenders on both sides of the aisle, and if you behave badly, you just behave badly. We're going to come after you as long as we've got time and the knowledge and the snark left in us, because we don't care. We expect people to behave well on both sides. You are role models to our youngsters, whether you like it or not. We elect you to do and behave well, and when you don't, we're going to come after you.
Well, like with the vote fraud / domicile thing that we've been working on all week and talking about. You know, the Democrats, including the out-of-state Minnesota-based, liberal millionaire money-funded Granite State Progress,
Xander Rice Hawkins
has posted 4 names of Republican political campaign operatives who may or may not have voted in the state as or as not residents, and they're using this as a foil to the things going on with regard to Martha's Motel and the 8 people that voted from her house. 4 of whom were not her relatives, some of whom may have been adult children who live elsewhere. We don't know that yet. But my response to that was, great, let's kick them all out. Don't let any of them vote here.
Well, I also see that as an operative trying to act or duplicate what's going on in D.C. with the IRS, where, well, the IRS picked on our progressive groups as well. Well, they got noted and then got passed on and approved, whereas the Tea Party, conservatives, constitutionalists, and all of that stuff got held into limbo for now up to many, many years. Nice try, guys, but you fell on your noses and did a nosebleed.
And
right. Well, it was somewhere in limbo and somewhere outright harassed.
Yes.
And I'm fine. I mean, if the Democrats can keep up with us, because we're going to be at this for a while. Pardon my lisp. My inside palate is still swollen from my surgery. It'll probably get worse as I go. If they can keep up, because they think this is going to end in a little while, and Martha can go back to her quiet little life as a New Hampshire state senator. But it's not just about Martha. We're going to talk about the people who came here. We're going to talk about where they live and work and where they're supposed to vote. And we're going to talk to the people who live around them and talk to the media in their areas and ask questions about their state laws for domicile. And we're going to keep going. And there are more Marthas out there. And we have a pretty good clue where they all are, and this isn't going away. So if the Democrats can keep giving us Republican names, we'll be happy to look at those. Ed Nail, who will be our guest after our first guest, which is Jim Rubens, he's going to come talk to us about that. We're bipartisan on the issue of vote fraud. We don't want you voting here if you don't live here, period.
This is like, one of my pet peeves is open and transparent government. And I'm happy to join up with any Democrat or any socialist for that matter to provide for a citizenry that will have a more responsive government to them, that what goes on in government should be open, should be done by a well-defined process so that we can oversee our own government. Because after all, these guys work for us. These are supposed to be civil servants rather than civil masters, and too often we see that switched around. You've seen enough of our right to know stuff or discussions on Granite Grok. Even going to the Supreme Court of New Hampshire to win an RSA 91A right to know request with Doug and Tom. This comes before your time, guys. And that was a very important precedent. It is cited not only here in New Hampshire, but all over the country now as a model for what is expected and what is demanded of our citizens of their government.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I shut that line of discussion off.
No, that's wonderful, and that's true. And It's not that we don't want the bureaucrats that we're paying as our servants to enforce any rules. We do. We want them to enforce the same rules fairly on everybody that we jointly ask them to enforce, not ones that they make up or that their agencies devise of their own volition.
That's true. And there's a lot of that, and there's plenty of it here. DES is a good example.
DES here in
DES is funded entirely by its own bureaucratic action, that therefore needs all the rules and fees and fines it can manage to get its hands on to fund itself.
So it's like a small town police department that lives entirely off the speeding fines as passers-by.
Pretty much.
Yeah, just like that guy who came forward. I saw that on Instapundit or on The Corner, or was it Hot Air? He was on Fox and Friends earlier this morning. Policeman who thought his job was to protect and to serve. A new police chief came in. I think this is a town in New York. I'll have to go look it up.
And he wouldn't enforce the quotas, and he got castigated for it. And eventually he said, "The heck with this! I'm telling tales." And
he did. And a lot of us who are not policemen have oftentimes said, how much quota do these guys have to do? And this guy came out and said, well, not so much the last chief, but this one. Yeah, I got a quota, and I'm not digging this.
That's funny because I was just watching Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp last night, and when he first got to Dodge City in the movie, they paid him a flat fee plus $250 per arrest, and there were lots of arrests.
And people will work to the metrics. I put up a post. I think I put that post up. People are. Oh yeah, this is great. I just love this. Obama's administration, in preparation for Obamacare, has put together a number of call centers, one in Contra Mesa, California. And, one of the inauguration promises is that Obama said, we need to make sure that people will have work at a decent wage. Now you've got Obamacare coming through, and you see lots of smaller companies making sure that they are under the 50 full-time employee limit, because then the Obama mandates kick in, that if you have full-time employees, the mandate kicks in, so they're kicking. And the Democrats decided to even redefine. They love to redefine the language, but they redefine what full employment is from 35 to 40 hours per week down to 30 hours. And they're all aghast that companies are reacting to our laws, that now they're reducing their employees' time to 25 hours, so that they're not full-time folks. So what's the Obama administration doing now, guys? For their brand new call center that everybody thought was going to be full-time with good wages and full benefits, they're part-timers with no benefits. Thank you, President Obama, for putting actions to words.
And isn't it true that even in Obama's White House that the women are employed at significantly less salary than the men?
I re-mentioned that in the post as well. So, you look at this and you go, you just can't make this up.
No, and
they don't even know that their own policies are this destructive. They're just so stupid.
If we didn't have arbitrary rules, we wouldn't have any rules at all with this lot.
Well, and that's really what it comes down to. The Democrats paint us as being people who are anarchists, that we want to drown government in a bathtub. No, we just don't want
we want to drown all the agencies in the bathtub and revert the government to its proper function.
Correct. We want to get rid of most of it because most of it is superfluous. Even though they think that they are not.
They don't have any concept of how the free market works. They seem to think that if the government doesn't do it, nobody will. But the fact of the matter is that if there's a need to be filled, somebody will find the best, fastest, cheapest, most effective way to do it in the free market because they can earn money on it. And they'll do it. They will fill every single need.
Yeah, and there is a place for government to sort of override that, to say, if you're working for a governmental purpose, you have to meet some minimum standards. And yes, health and safety type of stuff as well. There is some stuff like that. But when you're actually saying that
electrical code, good example. To some point, you need to make sure that whoever wires your house doesn't set it up to burn down while you're in it.
Well, I kind of. Here's where the libertarian part of me kicks in. It's like, if I want to do that work myself and I'm satisfied with it, why should government keep me from my
What if you sell your house to somebody, it burns down and they die?
Well, good point. I look at manufacturers, and there's a voluntary organization called the ISO. And manufacturing firms and service firms have their own codes by which they can market themselves, ISO 9000 being the most famous. That means we know what we do.
ISO 1000.
Yeah.
European Socialist Tyranny.
Well, no, it's a voluntary
I was
organization.
an ISO manager. It's Socialist European Tyranny.
Well, yeah, but
It
you
is still voluntary, yes.
yes, and it's not run by government entities.
No.
So
It-
hold on. So there is stuff like that. There's underwriters' laboratories that can say this stuff is safe or it is not. So why do I need that? If I'm going to buy a house, I should have the inspector going, I'm going to look at everything. And yes, it may increase the cost of that. But if I build the house for me and the house burns down because I've screwed up, and that's on me. And if somebody wants to buy my house afterwards, I'm going to tell them, I did this myself. You probably want to check this out. Now, again, that could
Now
be a bad
that's fine.
that could be a
That's
bad consequence for me because they might say, "No way, I'm going
Right.
out of here."
I have no problem with that.
See-
But it doesn't have to be government that does the checking. You could have, just like ISO,
Anybody,
you
private
could,
companies do it. Yeah.
right, and that's my point.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
really my
That's
point.
a good point.
ISO is a bit extreme. If I work for a company that gets big enough to start imposing ISO management, it's time for me to move. But that's another story. I find it suffocating, as does Steve. But it is a mark of.
I got our consultant fired.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a mark of process that says you at least know how to manage things.
Well, the problem with ISO is that the rules are pretty simple. ISO says that you must follow whatever written procedure you wrote down.
Correct.
If the procedure is to create crap, as long as the procedure matches what actually happens, it passes ISO standards. Now,
therefore, so does government.
So, right, and that's a perfect example of ISO standards right there. But then you get into arguments where you start to use your force as an ISO company on other companies that may or may not be ISO, and force them to do things in a manner in order for them to do business with you that you could do without ISO. You don't need it, but it's this huge thing, and you have to pay. And it's I did it for a couple of years. I wrote some standards and some programs.
Yeah, but the whole idea of ISO, when you're writing this stuff down, as you said, and if you turn out that your procedures are crap, because I used to be an EDI consultant, and having to trace through the business processes and showed a couple of companies, I can't believe you guys are still in business because of this convoluted circular way that you do strange things. It's supposed to say, this process of investigating what you really do should give you the chance to say, there's a better way to do this. Let's do that instead.
Yeah,
but I hear the music.
I can sum this all up. The people I used to work with said I was my own bureaucracy.
Fair enough. And I'm a much bigger fan of UL than big bureaucracy, by the way.
All right, we gotta go. We'll be back. This is GrokTALK.
Yeah. What?
Welcome.
Good morning.
I'm Skip.
Hey, Skip.
Nice to meet you. This
I'm
is
Mike.
Mike and Steve.
Mike?
Yeah, Mike.
And Steve.
Yeah.
And we are the ADD bunch of bloggers from Granite Rock.
Yeah, we went a little too far down the ISO rat hole. I wanted to reinforce what you said about UL being basically voluntary or insurance-based
Right.
assurance of quality and lack of danger. And I agree with you, by the way. I wire my own houses and I don't ask no stinking permission. You know,
Oh, yes, I do need that.
because the home inspector should be liable if he misses something.
Yeah.
He should be bonded, and that's and also the previous owner, if it was gross negligence, should be liable.
Yep. Well, we could.
And that's
I'm gonna
why-
play the Motel 6 commercial in a second.
Oh,
you gotta listen
we
to
gotta
this.
I just
listen
made
to it.
this week.
This is great.
It's coming on after this one.
Oh, by the way, you gotta put the Rhino commercial back in. It was a hit last week.
Was it?
When I
I
played
do
it.
still have it.
Yeah.
Rhino Radio.
Yeah, Rhino Radio. Oh, everybody loved it.
I'm gonna adjust his down. I think he's too loud. Okay, here
Let's
we
see.
go. I just did this week.
Well, I can't hear your voices.
Not yet. No. We're off. We're just doing this.
It's good. It's good there.
Okay. Actually,
Down a little bit. Sorry. I hear the Motel 6 times.
You doing the intro?
GrokTALK.